The world we live in can be a minefield of confounding, confusing, and conflicting peaks and valleys. Have you found yourself exasperated and bewildered to the point that you threw your hands up in the air and declared, "I can't literally even"? Well, never fear, novices. Your postgraduate studies in life start here. I'll be your sage on the side for those ups and downs. I'm Professor Moose, and I'm going to help you learn to even. Storytime. You find yourself walking down a quiet, paved country road. It's early in the fall. The weather's cool, finally. There's no traffic. You walk along, listening to the sounds of birds and squirrels in the trees. Eventually you come upon a small roadside picnic area. There at the picnic area, you see a man. He's not exceptionally tall, not exceptionally short, medium build. And you can see that he has an enormous Route 44 Sonic cup in his hand. He's holding it with both hands in front of him, and he's sucking furiously on the straw. As you approach, you can hear him desperately trying to quench his thirst with the last few droplets of whatever was in his cup. He repositions the straw. He shakes the pea gravel ice in the Sonic cup, and he manages to slurp up a few more drops of moisture, but you can tell that he's desperately hunting for more. He turns and stops for a moment, forgetting about his thirst, and notices you. He smiles. You smile back. He nods his head, and he goes back to his cup. You nod too, even though he can't see you now, and you continue walking. You walk on a little further. The road turns to the left for a while, and you come upon a man whose truck is stuck in the mud. He has a white Ford F-100 with a red door. You can see that he has one of his back tires stuck in the mud. He will sit there for a few seconds and then occasionally give it some gas as the wheel slowly spins, catching here and there, pulling the truck a few inches forward, and then rocking back into position, firmly stuck. He stops for a moment as he sees you walking up the road. He smiles, tips his hat, nervously waves, being embarrassed to be caught in this situation, and then goes back to trying to rock his truck forward and reverse out of its hopelessly stuck position. You continue walking along the road. It curves to the right now. The trees on either side stretching their finger-like limbs, casting shade on the pavement. The paint that was once here, worn away over years and years of driving and some neglect. And you come upon a small footpath on the right. You turn to your right and see the footpath leading down a small hill under thick, overgrown vines and bushes. You turn and sit down on the path. The path is fairly steep, but not treacherous. It's an easy walk, downhill. The ground here has been compacted over years and years of use by people, animals. You continue down the hill, listening to the birds, squirrels, the occasional frog, as they move in the trees, live their lives in the wilderness around you. Down, down, down the hill you go, curving a little this way then that, until you come upon a break in the foliage. And there you can see sunlight streaming out gently rolling hills of a small town cemetery. The cemetery has stood here for ages. As you look about, you can see headstones dating back over 100 years. You can see a fresh grave or two with new stones, shiny, polished marble, piles of rough, upturned earth still resting in place over someone's loved one. And then you see, near the center of the cemetery, there's a small, homey building. You set out towards the building. As you approach the small cottage near the center of the cemetery, you can see the owner's 3 dogs bound from around the corner, excited to see a person come running up to you. They are hyper and excited, tails wagging furiously behind them. Their paws are covered in mud of freshly upturned earth that's been soaked in the rain. But as they get close to you, they stop and calm and regard you. They travel with you the short distance from where they are to the house in calm submission. You walk up to the cottage, round the corner, pass by the house plants on either side of the stairs, make your way up to the screen door and knock on the door facing. You hear from inside a quaint, soft-spoken, "Come on in." You open the screen door and the spring creaks under years of tension pulled to and fro. You walk in and you see the groundskeeper. He's standing over his stove. Next to him there is a large, bubbling cast iron skillet. You can see that he has freshly battered fried chicken sitting in the skillet, and he's tending it with a fork. Across the large open room of the cottage, you can see his same-sex life partner sitting on the couch. He's eating cornbread and milk out of a large, opaque, white measuring cup. And he's watching Andy Griffith on a black and white television with rabbit ears. His name is Percy. The groundskeeper's name is Edgar. You stop for a moment to chat with Edgar. They stop for just a moment, cooking their chicken, eating their cornbread, watching Andy Griffith, to talk with you, catch up. Edgar tells you that he's glad to see you. But you know that Edgar is glad to see most anybody. He doesn't get much company here in the graveyard. Edgar tells you of some new burials. That's most of the news he has to share. You share some news about what's going on in your life with your loved ones. You chuckle. You share a moment. Edgar tells you that he's got a bunch of crappie that he recently caught. He'd be happy to send some with you if you like. Sure, I'd love some, Edgar, you say. Mostly being polite, but who's going to turn down free fish? Edgar goes into another room where you can hear a deep freeze open, and you can hear some things rumbling around. Edgar comes out a moment later with a brown paper sack, and he hands it to you. Here you go. Enjoy, Edgar says. You thank him, say your goodbyes, and head out. You leave the cottage, passing by the pretty houseplants that line the steps, down onto the footpath that leads out the front of the cemetery. This time going back up a hill on the other side. You know this footpath will come out on the road again, farther down the line. You walk through the path up to the road, and as you get to the road, you wonder just how much fish Edgar gave you. So, doubtful of what you might have in your sack, you pick it up and start to unfurl it. But as you do, the bag gives way, the bottom being soaked with the condensation from the frozen fish. The frozen fish, unwrapped, falls to the ground. Lying there on the ground is a mass of 4 or 5 fish frozen together in water that you stare at through a brown paper bag whose bottom has given way to dampness and weight. Your fish have collected some twigs and debris from the roadside, and you're torn. Should you pick them up? Wrap them in the bag? Take them with you? Or would that be too much trouble? You decide to leave the fish, roll up the bag, wad it up as best you can, and decide that you'll throw it away as soon as you can find a trash can. You continue walking. You walk a good ways. The farther down the road you get, the more you regret leaving the fish. What if Edgar walks by and sees them? He'll feel bad, maybe embarrassed, maybe foolish. What will Edgar think? How did you dispose of the gift that he gave you out of the kindness of his heart? You shrug and decide that it's too late now to go back and pick them up. They've probably already started to thaw, and something is probably already making a meal of them. You see coming down the road, there's a black Camaro. The Camaro stops. The window rolls down, and you can see a billow of cigarette smoke pour out of the cab. You can hear Freebird playing inside at a volume of unhealthy proportions. There's someone you went to high school with in the driver's seat. You can see that they have neck tattoos and have clearly let life make some default choices for them rather than curating an existence based on wisdom. You can see a half-empty bottle of Old Crow sitting in the passenger seat as the driver stops and tries to reminisce with you over the sound of his roaring engine and his overly amplified southern rock. He recognizes you, and he seems to be grasping for some type of connection, desperately trying to lure you into a discussion of what were obviously his glory days. But you live in the now, not in the past. He offers you a drink and a smoke. You politely refuse. He eggs you on, tries to get you to let him give you a ride. You finally put manners aside and quite pointedly tell him, no thank you, you've got other better things to do. He's annoyed. He says, fine. Puts on his shades, rolls up his window, and squalls his tires as he leaves dust and rocks flown nearby as he speeds away from you. You feel a little dismembered, as if something was taken away, but also you feel transformed, gratified in the decisions you've made that have led you to a life a little more thoughtfully lived. And so you continue on, walking down the road, being one with the world, being one with nature, with it, in it, but also apart from it. You wonder how many people have walked the same path. You wonder how many more will walk it after you. How many others might stop and say hello to Edgar, who might discard a gift given in good neighborly friendship, but discarded in a moment of doubt. It isn't the kind of life that people would sing songs about, but then every life is full of meaning if we're only careful enough to slow down and take a look, to consider what kind of beauty lies in the banal details that we rush through and rush past every day. If we sincerely look and consider, we can find inspiration. We can find nobility. The bonds of friendship that we share with one another, our fellow man, make life worth living. They give meaning to our existence as the only animals that know they're going to die. We have to make sure that we seize the opportunity to capitalize on these moments, to revel in these friendships. People often forget that the golden rule, being a good neighbor, is our real national pastime. We have to stop looking at one another as other. We have to focus on the importance and the real reason behind our ideals. The attainment of a dream where we can walk hand in hand, arm in arm, and side by side with all of the rest of us. Because there is only us. There isn't really a them. We put up barriers to create them. They are different. They are not like us. They don't smoke the same smokes we smoke. They don't wear the same shirts we wear. They don't worship the same people, ideas we worship. They don't get their jollies the way we get our jollies. But we're still the same. We're still all one. When you consider those that you find most deplorable, most objectionable, the wild crow drinking, IROC driving, neck tattoo, undereducated, overconfident braggarts in your life that you meet along the road, they're still your fellow man. They're still entitled to some dignity and some concern and some care. There, but for the grace of God, go you. Just because the universe has let the odds fall in your favor doesn't mean you have the hubris to judge that person and to think less of them. Appreciate your blessings. Empathize with people. Yes, sometimes it requires effort. Sometimes you have to tell yourself, wait a minute, maybe I should think about their position. Maybe I should think about their perspective. How would I react if I were in their shoes? What would I do if I didn't have all that I have? That's the only way that anything good has ever happened to mankind. We only progress. We only improve. We only get better when we work to benefit others. Sure, we can work to benefit ourselves, but unless it helps someone else, we're sitting there in our truck spinning our wheels, rocking back and forth. There may be some lessons in the story, or it might have just been an interesting diversion for a few minutes. Either way, I'm Professor Moose. Thank you for listening, and this has been Learn to Even.